Juanita Richardson. She's going to be the SLA welcomer today. So take it away, Juanita.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Jane, and welcome to everybody. This is an excellent crowd. So pleased to see so many people interested in different roles as an information professional and how to secure those jobs. As Jane said, my name is Juanita. I'm the the immediate past president of SLACanada, the SLACanada community. For those of you who are SLA members, please don't forget to join our SLACanada community. There's no additional charge. We want to have as many names in our roster as possible. And for those of you who are not SLA members, you are very much welcome to join SLA. We are a great community. Just a reminder that all SLA members are welcome to attend our monthly board meetings. They are online, so very easily attendable. Just let any of us know that you're interested, and we'll be sure to send that email out to you. I'd like to, at this time, very much thank Jane Dysart, who is our Director of National Programming for SLACanada. She's the one who puts together these fantastic events. And of course, to Dysart and Jones, who are the sponsors of this Zoom platform that we use not only for these events, but also for our board meetings. So thank you very much to Dysart and Jones, to Jane and Rebecca, and welcome to all of you. Looking forward to a great event. And I'll turn it back to Rebecca.
Actually, it's going to be Jane, but that's okay. I want to welcome our speakers. We're thrilled to have three wonderful ladies with us today. We have Erika Steffer, who is the Principal Financial Services Practice Group with Egon Zehnder, and she's been there for 12 years, involved with talent management and acquisition. She started her career as a reference and research librarian with the Federal Court of Canada and the Library of Parliament. And she also worked here in Toronto with Russell Reynolds as a senior research consultant. Natalie Jones is an account executive with Ritual.ca and has worked for several recruitment and acquisition firms over the last several years, and in recruitment and acquisition, as I say. And our third speaker is Vicki Whitmell, who is Executive Director for Information Technology and Services Division at the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. And Vicki's been there for 18 years, actually, and she also teaches at the University of Toronto iSchool. She has been Chief Librarian at Rotman School of Management for U of T and Executive Director of the Canadian Library Association. So we have well experienced and interesting speakers for you today. And we're basically going to talk about recruitment, interviewing, hiring, and how it differs in the virtual remote world. We're going to talk about digital portfolios and how to make a good impression in the digital world. And I'm sure that you're going to learn things that you didn't know. So I want to welcome again to these ladies, and I've asked them each if they would talk a little bit about their roles and their sort of initial thoughts around a remote job finding. So I'm going to start with you, Erika, if that's okay.
Sure. Just to keep myself on track, I've just written this up so that I can make sure that I cover a lot of things. So hopefully that'll work for everyone. Just as a little story, along with many other people, I began working from home a year ago. And after the initial shock and disorientation, I found myself, along with my colleagues, ramping quickly back up to our usual workload and productivity. Video meetings became essential not only for interviewing far-flung candidates, but now for all interviews and internal meetings across offices and practices. So Zoom and Teams increased the connectivity within our firm, as well as with clients, and they facilitated global assignments as people didn't have to travel in person in order to win and execute assignments. And so we could easily draw on the best expertise from around the firm, regardless of our geography. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So today I'm going to talk about three things: some context about the world of global executive search, otherwise known as headhunting or recruitment. Second, a bit about my role as an expert or researcher in that ecosystem. And third, my views on online or virtual presence and its importance in the job process. So just to set the stage a little bit, our goal at Egon Zehnder is to transform people, organizations, and the world through leadership. I know it's kind of lofty, but we focus on our clients' specific needs, and we work closely with board and executive leadership of many of the world's most successful companies to contribute to successful careers, stronger companies, and a better world. In the midst of a global pandemic, the demands on leadership have never been greater, and companies want to partner with long-term trusted advisors to create tailored solutions together. So we work from the board down to about the vice president level as a unified team with over 500 consultants and 300 experts operating out of 68 offices in 40 countries across functions, industries, and geographies. So since we started 50 years ago in executive search, we know how to find and attract top talent. And in the past 5 years, we conducted thousands of searches and assisted more than 1,200 boards through the journey of CEO selection. We also performed over 3,600 board assignments. And in the past 3 years, our executive assessment and development team partnered with over 300 of the world's top companies, assessing over 10,000 executives in the process. So as much as possible, we all specialize, kind of like school. We all have majors and minors. So that could be industry, like in my case, financial services, function, like finance officers or human resource officers, or in my case, risk officers, or assessment and development, like understanding someone's potential and then coaching them to achieve their desired outcomes. So our ability to solve those leadership challenges rests on our relationships, insights, and knowledge. And the expert research team working across local offices and our knowledge centers in India and Budapest brings together critical thinking, intellectual rigor, and high quality output when delivering for clients. So researchers like myself typically begin as an analyst, honing their skills and specialization, and grow with additional experience and client impact into more senior roles within research. And as researchers, beyond our respective areas of subject matter expertise, external client impact, and internal leadership, we're rated on competencies like results orientation, conceptual thinking, collaboration, and influencing, those sorts of things. So as a senior researcher, I partner with the consulting team in conducting business development, undertaking industry analyses, and completing about 20 to 25 search assignments a year. Most importantly, or commonly, these involved working with teams in other offices throughout the Americas, and depending on the mandate, with other English and French-speaking countries. So the day-to-day assignment work involves identifying, contacting, pre-screening, and assessing candidates and sources, capturing our learnings, crafting documents, and communicating progress to clients. In the process, I mentor less experienced local and knowledge center India researchers. And a substantial part of what we do is to understand a leader's strengths, passions, and influence. In fact, I spend much of my time identifying and assessing executive suitability for leadership opportunities, and a huge part of that is their online presence. So while we use other tools, LinkedIn is simply the price of entry. So unless you are so senior that you have a bio on your organization's website. So a more impactful profile on LinkedIn includes a professional looking photo, offering sufficient detail in your profile without going overboard, and keeping your profile current. It can be a good place to show videos or samples of your work. And moreover, when you're in job search mode, it's a great way to research organizations of interest and to network with people who might facilitate your working there. And the more active you are on LinkedIn, the more likely you are to show up in employer searches. Beyond that, the content and placement of your virtual presence is really predicated on your target audience and what sources they are likely to access. So know your passion and purpose, what you want to be known for, whom you want to reach, and what will resonate with them. Depending on whom you're seeking to influence, you may not need your own website or vlog or Twitter presence. However, contributing your talents to your profession, industry, or broader community, in particular, writing and speaking, will get you noticed. And the In the absence of time to create your own original research or work, you can share interesting articles, TED Talks, or other materials with your connections. This visibility will benefit you when you're in job search mode, and consider that fewer than 20% of jobs are filled by response to an ad. The other over 80% come through other methods, notably referrals and search firms. People have to be willing to put their reputation on the line to suggest you. And to do that, they have to know you, see you in action, and experience what you're capable of doing. For this, you have to be contributive and activate your network. Networking is key to most successful career moves, so even online and virtually, it's essential nonetheless. In addition to LinkedIn and your intellectual contributions, both information and job-specific interviews are now being done virtually. As with everything else that's moved online, COVID has made filmmakers, setting, and light designers of all of us. From the perspective of authenticity, it's preferable to have a real, not virtual background, which can feel fake sometimes and pixelated. So think about what you're projecting and try to have a clean and professional background. You also want to make sure that you have good light in front of you so that your features are clear. Best also to get to know the application that you're going to be using for your interaction and to sign in early to make sure that everything's connecting okay. With physical distancing and travel restrictions this year, organizations and candidates have had to wrestle with getting comfortable hiring or accepting a new role with people they may have never met in person. Given the cost of hiring and mishiring at senior levels, this is not a small question for both sides. Getting to know what's beyond the page is important, and both sides will do their due diligence. In addition to lots of video chats through the process, it's led to soft referencing by triangulating other people's experiences with the candidate or organization, as well as in-person meetings via backyard chats, walks outdoors, and videos to showcase organizations and communities to candidates. If I were to offer one observation, while there's certainly disparities in access to technology, for those who have it, there has been a democratizing aspect to the virtual interaction of the past year. People who would ordinarily be in power suits are wearing their hoodies, vests, and sweaters at home, carving out a workspace from a bedroom, kitchen, or dining room table like the rest of us. And with life going on in the background, it's been deeply humanizing and shifts the dynamic. That said, I do have a few small tips for coming across professionally, even while in business casual. Some clothing colors come across better on screen than others. Beyond the fact that wearing blue makes you appear more trustworthy and reliable, it's generally a good color on screen. I get comments about my glasses almost every Zoom call with people who I haven't seen in a while. And while attire may be business casual, makeup, jewelry, and grooming should remain professional, even as some of us wrestle with the challenge of not having seen the inside of a hair salon or barbershop in months. So in conclusion, while you may undertake the other ways of representing yourself virtually, at the bare minimum, LinkedIn is still the go-to for many in the search professions, and a robust professional profile there will serve you very well. And when meeting virtually, while some dress code standards have relaxed, the overall importance of professional presence has not. I hope that some of these comments have been useful, and I look forward to the discussion that follows. Jane, you're on mute.
Yeah, yep, there I go. Busy saying thank you. So many great things to think about and do. That was fabulous. Thanks so much. And I'm going to now ask Natalie if you would give us a little bit about your perspective.
Yeah. So would you like to know about interviewing? My experience with interviewing?
Sure.
Okay.
That was, yeah.
Okay. So just in terms of interviewing right now, I've gone through the interview processes lately, and I used to be a recruiter. So I have a little bit of the ins and outs, and there's a new technique, not really technique, but a style of interviewing that I've come across more recently now than ever, especially since COVID, because I find that companies, because we can't meet them in person to do interviews, they need some other way to really figure out what type of person you are. So there is this interview style called a top grade interview. And usually it's about 1 hour, and it's about like, it's probably the second round of an interview process where someone will fire questions at you for 1 whole hour, starting from, in my case, they started from high school, but I would assume they would make you start like anywhere from like 5 to 10 years ago. So basically it gets really intense. They ask you certain questions like what your favorite course was, what was your least favorite course, why was that your favorite, why was it your least, what were your grades, why did you decide to go to that university that you went to? Why did you just pick that program? What was your favorite course? What were your grades? When you started your first job, why did you pick that company? How was the interview process when you onboarded with that company? How did you rank amongst your colleagues in terms of performance? What were the colleagues that were performing better than you doing that you weren't? They ask a lot of questions. Why did you leave? Why do you want to be in technology and not another industry? Like, what are your metrics? What would your manager say or your biggest strengths are? What would your manager say your biggest weaknesses are? Yeah, that's a bunch of them, but pretty much it went on for an hour and it was rapid fire. It's a rapid fire style of interviewing, and it really helps these interviewers figure out what type of person you are. And yeah, still waiting to be moved to the next round, but I did make it past 1 round of that style of interview so far. So we'll see how that goes, but that's my 2 cents on how interviewing has been right now, at least in the tech industry. Yeah, that's what I can say.
Well, I thought it was really interesting, Natalie, that you said that there was no conversation. It's just the rapid questions. So your brain has to keep, switching gears and being able to come up with something very quickly.
Yeah.
Was that hard?
It's really, it's hard, but I even asked the recruiter beforehand, I'm like, how can I prepare for this? Just from a recruiter's perspective, how can I prepare for this? And she goes, there's honestly no way to prepare because they're just asking you questions about yourself. And these questions pretty much require you to reflect and iterate your experience really quickly. So they're just really seeing how quickly you can think on your feet when it comes down to it, and what your answers are. I mean, I said my least favorite class was math. So I don't know if that told them what type of person I am. They probably, they go over it with everyone in the end.
Yeah. Very, very interesting and pretty scary. And I guess in some cases you have to sort of, if you're going into it, have some of those thoughts and ideas already, in your mind. I know that when they talk about branding and PR, when you're doing a press conference or something, or you're a politician, you have to give your answer, right away, and you try and get across what you want them to hear as much as you can. So, wow. Well, that's definitely a challenge. We'll come back to you in a minute, but Vicki, how about a little bit from your perspective?
Well, I thought I could talk a little bit about what our experience has been over the last year. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, and I see that you're from around the world. So we are Ontario's parliament. Like parliaments around the world, we have members who represent constituency offices across the province. It's their ridings, and they come to Queen's Park, which is where our legislative building is, and they debate. And of course, they have much focus this year on what's happening and around the pandemic. So immediately after the pandemic was declared, we all went to work from home. And the vast majority of us, those who are in the more support areas, and the areas I'm responsible for are library, research services, IT, records management, and open parliament, anything related to information and technology. And so we immediately there's about 100 of us in my group, and we have been working at home since day one. We have opened the library for a short period of time with skeleton staff, but really those are only the days where the house is sitting. During that time, I have been personally on the hiring panel for, I think, between 8 and 10 people. Most of them are librarians, because I always like to sit on the library panel, because I'm a librarian in training, and I also, as Jane mentioned, I'm also teach at the University of Toronto's Information Library School. So I really like to be there. But I also, during that time, hired 2 directors, and these are fairly senior level positions in the assembly. So there was it's a little bit different. There are different points in their careers, and we have different criteria when hiring people at that level. Much of our process is a little bit different. It's in that it's very traditional. We don't look at your online presence. The only reason I would look at an online presence is to make sure that you have no political affiliations, or you're not an advocate for a political cause. Because one of the reasons one of our criteria around hiring is that we all have to be non-partisan and non-political. We could have not belonged to a political party. We could have not campaigned for someone who's running for office at any level. And nor could we be someone who goes and demonstrates on the front lawn of the assembly about an issue around what our members are talking about. So that's where we might look at your online presence. They might look at your Facebook page, for example, to see if you have particular leanings one way or the other, if you have particular thoughts, because that could disqualify you from a position, particularly the higher up you get in the organization. So other than that, we rely on a very traditional process where we post the position. Certainly we do it on our websites, and then we'll post it around to various LinkedIn. We usually post to LinkedIn, various places where we think we're going to find. We hire, particularly in some of the research areas, we're hiring people with very specific skill sets or knowledge. And of course, once you get into parliamentary rules, we're looking for people who, and there's not that many people in the world that know an awful lot about that. So sometimes we look for very specific things. So we also think it's unfair to go and check online. If one has a very, very good online presence and someone doesn't, does that create an imbalance among our thinking around candidates? So we have to be a little bit careful about that. We're a very traditional organization, as you might guess, being the Parliament. So our interviews beginning in the last year have all been conducted virtually. We're doing exactly what we're doing here. We have a small panel. We're using Teams for the most part. We do our best to make sure that the candidate has good internet connections, and we're hoping that that's the case. For the most part, they go slowly. And then it's different in that virtual versus face-to-face, in that in a face-to-face group interview, there might be 4 or 5 people at the table with you. So you can see what they're thinking about, what they're doing. They're writing with someone that finished writing, how they might be responding to something that you're saying, or maybe when it's time to stop talking. In a virtual, we turn it off just because of bandwidth issues, and just because we're hoping it might make it a little bit easier for people. So you will only see the person who's asking the question. And if we've got 10 questions in an interview, the panelists will share, we might have 2 or 3 questions each. So what we found, what I would say generally, is we have similar questions. So the questions are pretty much the same, and they will go around with things like Natalie mentioned, what have you done in the past? What did you do well at? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your goals? But we also get into situational questions. What would you do if a member came to you and asked you this and gave you this timeline and asked you that much? Get you thinking about the kinds of how you might respond in a given situation. But what we've seen in the last few months, and this is a change that I've seen, is that we're starting to ask people how they would interact with others in a setting such as this. We had hired someone, she's a designer for our websites. She started the first day we went into lockdown. So we have never met her. We've only seen her virtually, and it's been a year. So we learned a lot. How do you onboard people? How do you train people? How do you connect them? We have a very unique culture at the Parliament, as you might guess, understanding the rhythms of a Parliament, understanding what happens, what's important, what it means when something happens. And so we've had to really figure out how to do that. So one of the questions we ask candidates is, how would you get to know us? How would you get to know the organization? And this, I think, is a good question to ask people, because it means that people have to know themselves. Many of us who are in the information profession, and I always ask students this, why are you here? And I always do a personality test with them, and they generally come around the same. A lot of us are introverts. We're there because we're service people. We really want to help. But many of us and students, I send students out on placements, and they all say the same. It's very, very hard to connect in the virtual world. So we need to look for people and find for people who are comfortable in that, because in a virtual work world, you have to find a way to put yourself forward. If not, you're invisible. And I think that's the biggest change that we've had. We can hire people, but it's then helping them and making them comfortable, because you don't have the hallway connections anymore. You have to have basically an appointment to see anybody. It has to be set up. You have to wait for that time with people, and you might have to wait and put your questions piled up and that. So it's getting to know yourself and understanding how well you do in that kind of situation, how comfortable you are. And if you're not, how is it that you're going to become? What kind of skill sets are you going to learn? And as we're thinking about what's next, and as we're thinking about, are we all going to come back together? Are we going to come back in groups? Are we all going to stay at home? No one seems to know and understand that yet. I think that that's going to take a different skill set of it. Because when we're in the office, if we're going to be in the office, we're going to have to really focus in that period of time in making those connections, in being visible and being with each other. And then make the best use of that knowledge when we're isolated and we're working remotely. So those are the kinds of things that we're starting to look at when we ask people and interview people, ask about how are they going to manage that new world that we've got, because it's very different. So those are just some of my observations that I've had over the last few months of interviewing.
That's great, Vicki. And you know, it reminds me to give kudos to the San Jose State University Library School, iSchool, which has been operating for, I think, more than 10 years now, totally online. And that was one of the things that they said very early on, was that, you know, they had students from around the world who had to, you know, deal with the time issues, but they had to collaborate in their groups. They had to, you know, be engaged online. And so those were some students who learned early those skills that that you're talking about, that we all need, but most of us have not had that that kind of opportunity. And it'll be interesting to see with the way the universities are operating now, if that will make a difference. I don't know. What do you think about that, Natalie? About getting people used to working in a collaborative or a virtual world. How do you connect and engage with, you know, your employers or employees?
Okay, so that's actually a very suiting question, because I started at a job during the pandemic, essentially. And I was lucky in a sense that my entire team also started during a pandemic. So I wasn't the only one. So I kind of got lucky on that end, but at the same time, we're all like trying to stand out. So the number one thing I would suggest is every meeting, definitely be on camera. You don't want to not be on camera. Like in a professional meeting, like I just wouldn't suggest that. And just also make sure that you have like a nice background, that it's not distracting, that it's kind of like not clutter, just simple, because you don't want people to get distracted. But yeah, in terms of, that's what I suggest for like Zoom, being on Zoom and in meetings. But in terms of collaboration, Slack has been a great tool. Just, talking in chat in Slack with your team, you can post like recipes and fun things to do outside, like anything to keep people busy on weekends or weeknights. On Friday, sometimes we'll have like a group chat, like where we'll bake a recipe or have a drink. It's always nice to still keep that human interaction. So definitely I suggest arranging little team powwows just to not talk about work for once and talk about your life and what's going on in your life, and anything except for work. That's necessary to stay sane in a COVID world right now.
The social side of things, that's the biggest challenge, definitely for us all.
I know I'm not supposed to interrupt. Can I interrupt for a minute?
Yes, you may.
I know. I just want to follow up on the background and having the camera on, and something both Erika and everybody's talked about it, and Dysart and Jones, we still do recruiting. In fact, we did virtual recruiting starting in the late 1990s, where we never saw people, and we recruited for large corporations in the US. And they were never seen in person before they started either. It's quite amazing to me. But what I wanted to add here is that what Natalie said about keeping the camera on is so essential, but in the interview. And to make sure that the camera, because this is one of the questions that came in, make sure that the camera is looking directly at you. You're not looking down at anyone. You're not looking up. It's directly at you. Erika talked about the color is essential. If you are in your bedroom, use a blurred background. I kid you not. We interviewed someone for a CEO position with their bed in the background. It just doesn't, don't go there. There are all kinds of ways that you can do this. And if you have to pay to up your bandwidth, do it. Because there is nothing worse than having a fuzzy or digitally impaired, as I say, screen, or where every time you move your hand, you are, because no matter what, it's a conveying of you. So if you are job searching, and you will be interviewed virtually, I don't know how many times you'll be interviewed virtually. You will probably have to do presentations virtually. You'll have to do written assignments virtually. In fact, there's one client, they didn't believe that the virtual assignment, the written assignment would be done by the person. I'm like, oh, really? And so they want them done on camera, typing their written assignment. So do invest in some good bandwidth. Thanks, Jane.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, we've been talking about this for a lot over the past year in terms of, we've been doing some virtual conferences as well as these Zoom meetings. So, how you are perceived is really, really important. And, we've been talking a lot about, good cameras and good angles, good lighting. And yeah, the blurred background, that was a new one to me just recently. So interesting. In the chat, by the way, if you have questions for our panelists, please put them there, because we want to get some interaction and other ideas going. I also wanted to mention that on the SLACanada Facebook page, I have posted a number of things that have come across my desk over the last little while of job boards for hot library jobs, and the LAC in the US has remote job opportunities. They recently were looking for an e-resource manager for a law firm, and metadata strategist and others, but they also have a lot of material on their website for finding jobs and career advice. What else was on there? Oh, Rebecca just passed along the tip of management tip of the day from Harvard Business Review. I think it was yesterday, on preparing for a remote interview. And much of what Erika and Vicki and Natalie have already said was listed on there. But as I say, those resources are on the SLACanada Facebook page if you're looking for them. But going to other questions now, we've well, what would you tell people about their digital portfolio? Erika, you mentioned about LinkedIn being the most important, and linking to, you know, videos or other examples of your work. I thought that was pretty interesting. How would you encourage people to build their digital portfolios?
Well, I think there's probably a couple of things I would say. One is, I know that there are ways in actually producing a digital portfolio and doing that in a very technologically savvy way. But for those of us who are less technologically savvy, LinkedIn itself, there are ways to just, you know, you can share articles, you can share things that you've written yourself, you can share projects you've worked on. I was working with my alma mater, not working, but volunteering with my alma mater, talking with some students about their LinkedIn profiles. And some of them had some really great things that they were showing of projects that they'd worked on. So you could watch a video about their project and those kinds of things. It gives people a sense of who you are as a professional. So it's really thinking thoughtfully about, what do you want to be sharing with the universe? How do you want to be known as a professional? So whether it's particular projects or ideas and things that you think will substantiate the value add that you're bringing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Vicki or Natalie, do you have something else around the digital portfolio area that you'd like to add?
I can just mention that at the U of T iSchool, I teach a practicum course. And so in that course, each student is required to do a 105-hour practicum project in an organization. So for the last 3 semesters, unfortunately, the school has been remote. So what we used to do at the end of a term was have an exhibition where it would be like science fair kind of thing. We would invite members of the information library community to come in and see what the students had done, walk around, everybody has their little booth. When we closed down, we had to do that online. So what we now require the students to do is do a poster about their project, you know, graphically showing what they did, how they did it, and what the benefits to the organization were. And like Erika said, it really brings the project to life and really can tell the story of what the student did. So I encourage the students to put those up on their own LinkedIn as well. And then we also have a practicum site where we put everything up for the students. So that helps, that kind of giving a graphic representation of what you do, I think is really good. If you can do it in a way that makes it interesting and exciting and gives people an idea of what's possible and the kind of work that you do.
All righty. It's a question that's come in that reminds me of I'm going to make it broader than the one that came in, but if you have not worked in a library before, but you have sort of similar experiences, or you've worked in a public library and you want to go to an academic library or vice versa, or a special library, how do you make your application worth getting into the next round, to the interview? How do you attract attention so that you will actually get to the next stage and not just have your application, you know, thrown into a pile somewhere? Anybody want to take on that one?
Vicki, do you want to take a first stab at that and I'll add in?
Sure.
I can take it on because I just coached somebody through this. And
oh, well, there you go.
so it was, and because as most of you know, I have the attention span of a gnat when it comes to jobs. So I've had several different jobs in several different sectors. And it's where the letter comes in, the covering letter. People don't understand that your covering letter must speak to the job even more than your resume does. And Erika and Vicki, Natalie, you're welcome to disagree with me here. I just know that is what we really look at. We will thumb to the resume or, online, but that covering letter. And so in the covering letter, it is emphasizing what you understand about the sector that you are applying for and how your experience and your thinking really will add a huge value and which, usually works. You can at least get, and I was just telling Jane and Erika before we went on camera that particularly in some sectors right now, they are using video covering letters or video screening. So as you know, you have to get through the initial screening, right? Yes, no. And so in the academic sector, they ask for a video that is no longer than 10 minutes and that addresses 2 questions. What are the trends impacting post-secondary education, and why are you the person to lead our library or whatever the job is into these trends? So really making you think.
Yeah, it's not easy these days. Vicki, did you have a comment there as well?
Yeah, the best example I have of this is a student who applied for a job, and she had worked as a genius at an apple bar.
Oh, that's perfect.
So she had no special library experience, nothing pertained directly to what I was looking for, but she had that. And in talking to her about her application, I said, look what you've got. You are, first of all, you understand technology. You're under a higher pressure situation. People are screaming at you because their apple's not. Great customer service, all of those things we think about, as an Apple genius. And what she needed to do was take those pieces of what she did in that job and say, this is why I would be good in your job. This is why I would be good at serving members of parliament, because high pressure, I can explain things to them easily. I can help them, all of these kinds of things. So it's taking the pieces of what you've done in another job and say, how does that apply in this situation? How do you make it work? A lot of people, when they read it, as I said before, when they look at a resume, they can't connect the dots between that, what you might do there, and what that means here. And a lot of times, the best candidates are the ones that come from bring some different skill sets than just what you have. And so, if you can explain that and bridge that, and that's what the cover letter does. That's exactly what you look for in a cover letter.
Absolutely. And on that note, Rebecca, tell them why Deirdre and I hired you, first of all, at the Royal Bank of Canada 50 million years ago.
Because I'd worked at a correctional institution, and they figured that if I could
do that,
I could manage that. Right. So there is a very interesting question. There are 2 interesting questions in the chat. I don't know if you if you now saw it or not, but do you have any thoughts about including union activity or involvement on LinkedIn?
I would say that it's definitely something you can speak to on your LinkedIn bio. I would include it in a bio, probably.
From a leadership
It's
position now?
definitely something I would have seen as a recruiter. Yeah, definitely in the bio.
Yeah.
I think you would have to be thoughtful about your purpose for including it. Because that could cut both ways depending on what you're applying to do. And this is something, the profile is something that's going to be seen by everyone, and not everyone has a favorable view of unions and involvement in unions. So some people might say, great, you've demonstrated leadership and you understand the operating environment. And so there might be wonderful reasons to include it if you want to continue in a vein where you're always in a unionized environment. But if you're possibly looking at employment outside of a unionized environment, then that could hinder you. So I think it would be something I would be very circumspect about including. It might be something, you know, if I had had a leadership role in a union and that was something that would speak to my leadership skills, and then there might be a reason to do that. There are also equally, I think, reasons not to include it.
Interesting. We had another question about how do you keep your LinkedIn profile and feed updated and active without alerting your current employer that you're looking for a job?
Well, a lot of things that you might put on LinkedIn are not pertinent to whether or not you're looking for a job. You could be, you know, sharing articles that you've read with the people in your network and commenting on other people's things. So that kind of thing is not germane to a job search. I guess the key question is, do you mark on your LinkedIn profile that you're actively looking? That would be the key question.
Right. So when you're looking for people on LinkedIn, because Natalie, I know that you and Erika, you know, certainly are always looking at LinkedIn when you're recruiting. How do you, like, what would be the advice that you would give those people that are wondering about their LinkedIn profile? I know you've talked about this, Erika, but there are things like photos. There are things like some people have very long bios, some people have very short bios. What are you really looking for? Nat, you're looking for tech. Erika, you're looking for executives. I'm sure that they're very, you know, the criteria is very different here, but tell us about what you look for.
Natalie, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so one thing I look for in tech is you want, like, recruiters in tech primarily only search by keywords, and we search in tech stacks. So I obviously just would go to the job description, and if that person is looking for someone with a specific experience with a certain CRM system or a certain internal email marketing system, employers really like that. So just depends on what the employer is keen on. I would do a keyword search or Boolean search, say for Salesforce experience, and then I would narrow it down from there. It's all about narrowing it down by keywords. So I would definitely suggest, if you want recruiters to reach out to you, put more wording on your profile, because that's how they find you. It's through keyword searches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with Natalie on that. Similar, even at the executive level, you know, we're looking at keyword searches a lot of the time. I will say that in terms of people's descriptions of the work that they're doing, as you said, Rebecca, some people have very extensive, long descriptions, and some people have much shorter ones. And you know, keep in mind that whatever you're writing, other people have to read through it. So at some point, too much information is doing you a disservice. So there's a happy medium, I think, to that.
Interesting. And it's interesting that our discussion here about LinkedIn, because the beginning of May, I think it's May the 4th, and you'll see it shortly on the dysartjones.com website. We do a series of chats that we call Nexter chats, and we're going to be doing one of those with an executive of LinkedIn Canada. So we're hoping to find out some interesting facts about LinkedIn and to be able to use it a little bit better than we have in the past. I know there are amazing resources there that I didn't even know existed. I was looking at something the other day called LinkedIn Learning, which is a whole way of, you know, gathering more skills and knowledge. So I think LinkedIn is definitely something that we should know a lot more about, and being able to use it better.
Yeah, I would say, Jane, they have a lot of information there about you know, how to tailor your profile, and they do that for different target audiences. So for students and new graduates and, So there's a lot of information through LinkedIn that can be beneficial for anyone looking to update their profile.
Right, right. Did you see the question in the chat, Jane?
Go ahead.
When using keywords, should we copy directly from job ads? Are synonyms searched?
There you go, Natalie. How about that? Do you use different words for some of the things, or is it just those specific targeted, tech,
yeah, it really depends on the recruiter and how well they understand what they're looking for. If I was recruiting for a role I knew nothing about, I would probably just word for word copy keywords off the job description. So what I suggest, what I do in my resume also is under like the duties of the job, I will literally pretty much copy and paste what my actual job description was when I got hired on there, because that's the most formal, the most, tell all of what I did, and then just sort of, go from there. But yeah, that's all.
I think, and that's I think as people get further along in their career paths, they have to start to sift out what's really important in their career, in their work histories, because some of their early stuff, usually it's the most recent stuff that describes the most extensive and comprehensive work that they've done, and maybe the most senior work that they've done. And so sometimes the earlier roles, they just drop off a lot of the details and they focus more on what they've done most recently. And really, it tends to be more achievement-based or accomplishment-based, because really, whoever's reading your resume or LinkedIn profile, the question that they're asking is, what's in it for me if I hire this person? So, ultimately that, whether it's Natalie or me or Vicki or Rebecca, whoever is, looking at it, it's like, what's in it for me? And so, sort of back to that point of the person who's the genius at Apple, right? So Vicki can say, well, what's in it for me if I hire this person? Okay, she might not know anything about the Legislative Assembly, but she certainly knows about customer service, and she can think on her feet, and she's got good tech skills and good presence and all of that. So I can see what's in it for me. But to Vicki's earlier point, I think it's important to make those connections for people when you're writing out your resume in particular. A lot of times I don't even see a cover letter. I only see a resume, because when it comes to executive search, we're reaching out to the executive in question. They're not responding to an ad usually. So we've already talked to them. We've already had a conversation. They don't have to write a cover letter. They send in their CV, and their CV has to stand alone. And so, it's going to go through this process. So I want to be able to see from the CV itself why this person is relevant. So they need to, if they write a cover letter, great. And especially if there's any question like a gap, or, well, why did they move from this job? It doesn't make any sense to me. Then the cover letter is helpful. Otherwise, if it's straightforward, kind of, I can see, yes, they got a promotion, or they moved laterally and it was different responsibility, and then they moved up, like all that's fairly straightforward to see. I don't need a cover letter to describe that, but I should be able to get it from the CV itself. And the synonyms, to Natalie's point, I think when we're searching, we do look for synonyms as much as possible. Sometimes the word is the word, and sometimes there are lots of synonyms. And if it can be represented in the CV or the profile, that is certainly helpful.
Yeah, that's great, Erika, that you brought up from the, what's in it for me to employ you, because I think that's what a lot of people have been thinking about, in the job finding is, what are they looking for from me? How can I make it easy for them to say, yes, this is the person that will really, work out in this job that I'm trying to hire for. So those are all great tips. We are coming to our last few minutes, so I'm going to give each of you a couple of minutes just to, give us your final thoughts, if that's okay. Vicki, how about we start with you? Final thoughts.
The thing that people, you know, people will come in and they're look great on paper and they don't do so well in the interview. And why don't they do well on the interview? It's because they're not prepared, because they don't think about the organization. We always ask, what do you know about the Legislative Assembly of Ontario? It is your government. It's amazing how people have no idea. If you want to go and work for an organization, you need to figure out what they do. You need to listen to the questions. There are usually hints in the question as to why would they be asking me that question? So people can look great on paper, but the next piece is the interview. Practice with other people. Think about the kinds of questions might be answered. You know, Natalie's, that's a scary interview to go through, the one Natalie just described. But those are the kinds of things you need to think about. Why did I do this? Why did I do that? Show some analysis. Show that you have a good understanding of who you are and how you contribute and what you do well.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks, Vicki. How about Natalie? What are your last thoughts on job finding?
Oh, you're on mute.
My last thoughts, definitely, you know, focus your primary search. Well, I guess I find that most of the jobs right now are on LinkedIn. So optimize your LinkedIn profile first, and then your resume second, almost. Like LinkedIn profile is more so important now ever than your resume was, but both are still equally as important. And yeah, there's a lot of jobs out there right now. Everyone who laid off, you know, a couple months ago because of COVID is seemingly rehiring, and yeah, it's very active right now. So definitely hop on LinkedIn as your main search board and pump those resumes out, but don't forget to read the job description and definitely tailor your resume and make a cover letter.
Excellent, excellent. Erika, last thoughts from you?
I don't think I could have said it better than what Vicki and Natalie have already said.
That's great. That's great. Well, I want to thank you all. Those were lots of fabulous tips, and we do record these sessions, and you will be able to see them again later from the dysartjones.com website. So if you've missed something or your friends want to know more, you know, certainly have them visit. And as I said, we have more on LinkedIn the beginning of May if you want to hear on more on that topic. And for our April SLA meeting, we are having a tour of a library in BC. So for all of you who want to see that, please join us. And anything else, Rebecca, other than just thank you to everyone?
No, I think we're going to have to do a follow-up on the implications of the emphasis of diversity and inclusion.
And
There you go.
And
There you go.
on
That's a
some
whole
of the
topic
job
on its
postings,
own. Yep.
right now that are being done in special consultation with the human rights commissions that are purposely only inviting applications from biracial equity deserving populations. It's very interesting, and I do think we need a follow-up on it because it really shifts a lot of our thinking, especially in recruiting and in interviewing.
If I could just add in on that, there's some really interesting work that's been done on kind of doing sort of anonymizing CVs,
right?
Doing, you know, along the lines of what, say, symphonies do for blind performance, where you're you know, the person performs behind a screen so that you don't see them.
Right.
You know, all those. There's all kinds of very interesting work that's been done along those lines.
That's great. That's great. Well, we will pursue that further. And meanwhile, all sorts of people are writing in the chat. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Very informative. And I thank you all for being here. You were all wonderful. Great tips. Thanks a lot. And stay safe and healthy.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.